We just got done with Angie Racono last hour of KCTV5. If you are a Kansas City resident, you are now waiting an average of 53 seconds in the month of September on a 911 call. That is literally the difference between life and death. And to be like, well, that's only for the high crime areas. No, I mean, you could be sitting in a big old nice home in a low crime area. You don't know when or if you will need emergency services. And if you go to pick up that phone, you could be waiting over a minute, easily over a minute. Now, I asked Quentin Lucas about this earlier this morning, a couple hours ago, and here's what he said before we get to your calls at 913-408-7957.
I think there is a way to expedite the review process. It's obvious to everyone involved that this system is unacceptable right now. We can't continue to have the ongoing challenges that we're facing with 911 in Kansas City. And so, I think a few things that we're expecting to do soon. The city manager is under direction to look at what the unified system looks like. The fire department has now gotten on board with making sure we can do that. They have greatly improved their staffing on the 911 operating system. But of course, all calls, as you know, start at KCPD. We have got to make sure either if it's unifying KCFD and PD, unifying other agencies, or having kind of backup and support. So if you call KC, but there's no one here, you go to Raytown, then I think that's something we make sure we address long term.
Right now, there are 25 open positions out of 95 total positions. That is horrible. And by the way, there is currently a $2,500 hiring bonus. So what's going on? Why are they struggling? And what about you as a resident? Just how concerning is it to you? I'll tell you right now, just from a pure home value perspective and peace of mind, if all else is equal, and you've got two houses you really like, one inside of KCMO, one just outside of KCMO, which one are you buying right now? Chris in Grain Valley. Hey, Chris, you're on KCMO. What's happening?
Hey, good morning. Yeah, I have a hard time understanding the logic here, and the mayor just said it. They do some call routing. They send stuff to Raytown. I've worked in call centers. I do leadership development and management consulting in call centers and have for years. One of the things that in a call center, you have the ability to utilize an IVR, which is the conversant at the beginning. You also have the ability to adjust call volumes and route them to different places. And then if you need overflow, there are vendor call centers that you hire and have on standby that are trained and ready to go. And the second you have overflow, let's say there's, in a corporate environment or a sales environment, you have a big special that comes on and that drives, 500% more calls for 30 days. Well, you bring a vendor in. If you had a natural disaster, you should be able to switch those call routing to a vendor call center. And I'm sure.
Now,
I don't know this for sure, but I'm positive that has to be available out there.
Do you speak on this from some experience? Because you sound like you have a pretty good handle on the situation.
Well, so I've worked in call centers for a long time. I don't know on the emergency side if there are vendor call centers, but I do know enough about the call centers, and I have friends in the industry that bring new companies into their call centers all the time, that it wouldn't surprise me that there aren't resources there that they could call today and get calls routed to handle. Mm-hmm. It's just a part of the way the world works.
Yeah. I mean, Chris, thank you very much for sharing that. It just seems to me like a little private sector common sense could cut through a lot of the bureaucratic nonsense. Instead, what you've got right now is you've got the city going through a 45-day process to try to figure out whether or not they can combine with the fire department. The city manager is going to report back. Then they'll address it at the next Board of Police Commissioners meeting, and around and around and around we go. Crystal in Liberty is next up. Hey, Crystal, good morning.
Hey, how's it going?
Going well. What's happening?
Well, I work in property management, and I have worked anywhere from Blue Springs all the way to the Kansas side. And I will say that I tell my family and friends and even choose myself to work anywhere, live anywhere than a Kansas City address, just because I know crime has no address. And there's absolutely a huge difference between properties and where you work on whether or not you're going to get help.
Yeah. And do people usually take your advice?
They do, but at the same time, you know, when you kind of put all the rest of it of where you said like the houses are you going to pick a big house in this district or a big house in that one? They listen to me because it is a huge difference.
Well, and how sad is that, right? I mean, you're sitting there and it's like it's a great city. There are a lot of awesome things we love about it. But when it comes to where you want to reside and whether or not you feel like you're in the safest place possible between the crime and then also the 911 wait times, those two are going to be red flags for a lot of people right now.
Well, it's huge because just there in Liberty, you have the Liberty side, Kansas City side, still Liberty School District. Mm-hmm. And I will still tell everyone, find a way to get on the Liberty side for the calls and a couple other things, but for crime, 100%.
Crystal, thank you so much. Appreciate you listening.
You're welcome. Have a good one.
913-408-7957. Ryan in Lee Summit. Go ahead, Ryan.
Hey, Pete. So about, 10 years ago, I used to live in Waldo, and about 2 a.m., my wife and I, we hear somebody trying to kick in our front door and a break-in. We're, obviously home. And so, my wife grabs our two kids, hides in the closet, gets on the phone with 911, waits on hold for, it was minutes, at 2 a.m. Meanwhile, I'm downstairs, kind of hoping they don't get through the front door, but long story short, even once she got on the phone with 911 operator, it took the police 45 minutes with an active burglary at the house to even show up to my property.
And that was 10 years ago.
That was 10 years ago.
And it sounds like based on you calling from Lee Summit, you decided to make a move shortly after that. Is it fair to say?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, very quick.
Very quick. Very quick. Ryan, there's too many stories like that, and unfortunately, those stories have only gotten more frequent and worse here in recent years. Thank you.
No problem.
Appreciate it, man. I mean, that's like, especially Waldo. I mean, we've talked a lot about Waldo the last couple of years or couple of weeks, and someone sent me this last night, and I don't necessarily want to get too much into it because I have not been able to confirm it yet, but apparently there were half a dozen armed robberies of women in a certain part of town here in the last couple of nights. And there's something going on that's not getting enough media attention or any media attention that I'm going to try to dig into today. Somebody sent me a message on it late last night. But yeah, that's the stuff that people have to be aware of. Jonathan in Kansas City. Hey, Jonathan, you're on KCMO. Good morning.
Hey, Pete. So I actually applied for a 911 operator at Kansas City. So what they told me is the process takes months to go through their interviewing process, their testing process, their training process. They wanted copies of I've never had a job ask me for this. I don't know why they would. They said, we want a paper copy of your high school transcript. And I haven't been in high school for, years. Most jobs don't ask for that, let alone many don't even ask if you have a high school diploma. They wanted a copy of your birth certificate. They go through an extended background check that they go through the police officers with, which makes sense for cops. But for 911 operators, they go through full background check, including credit. And I'm thinking, you're paying these people a little more than $20 an hour. Like, and in this economy, in this Biden inflation, probably a lot of people are going to have credit issues. Like, that really limits your applicants. Like, anything in your credit, and you will disqualify, if you're behind on anything. So then they have to go through the extended reference that they do, checks that they do with cops and, people with national security. So it takes forever for the background check. And then once you get onboarded, it takes 2 weeks of training in a class, and then you have to do job shadowing. I mean, it is months before you get on. And to be honest with you, if you're just making a little above $20 an hour, you don't have months to wait to get a job. You're just going to go down the street and get a job the next day.
That is an excellent point, Jonathan. Thank you. I mean, that is comical. You can go to Walmart, to Target. You can go to some of the big gyms in the area, and you can start working on Monday at maybe not quite the same number, and you're not going to get the $2,500 signing bonus that they've got right now with the police department to be a 911 dispatcher, but you got a lot less headaches, and you're right to work. And all these background checks, I'm not saying you don't need background checks. You obviously do for people in these lines of work. You want to make sure you have the right people answering calls for folks who are in life and death situations. But as is, unfortunately, it seems like always the case, when the government's involved, this stuff takes so much longer than it needs to. 913-408-7957. Jeff is in the Northland. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, hey, the last caller calling in about applying for the job there with the operator there. Well, that's really interesting because, on our border, it sounds like they do things a little bit different there. I mean, what's that all about? That's kind of interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, that is interesting. You kind of waltz right through there, Jeff. Thank you very much. It's funny how that works. Something tells me Jeff blew his own punchline. I might be guessing on that. This is on the text line. Pete, this is just a joke on the text line. Thank you for reaching the Kansas City, Missouri 911. Press 1 for police. Press 2 for fire. Press 3 for extraction. Press 4 for mental health from Jackson County. Press 5 if you're poor, broke, busted, and disgusted.
You still poor, broke, busted, and disgusted.
And press 6 for the bar and grill. Oh, that's outstanding on the text line. Very, very clever on the text line. 913-408-7957. This is really a critical issue, though, in Kansas City, Missouri proper. And it's another thing that's degrading the quality of life. We can talk Chiefs, Royals, and all this fun stuff, and it's great, all we want. But this stuff is what matters for your home values, for your quality of life, and it's not getting better.